Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio Podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, the only man to shoot the same non-threat 4 times at Nationals, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. All too often, gun owners and gun culture are portrayed in the worst possible ways in the media. This podcast aims to counter that narrative by shining a light on the members of gun culture who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. They're all races, young and old, men and women, salt of the earth kinds of people who love their country and who are great people to be around. And this podcast is about them. Today you're going to meet one of these awesome people. Before we get started, let me tell you about GlockTriggers.com. Love them or hate them, the one thing you know about Glock pistols is that they are reliable. It's what makes them so popular with competitors, law enforcement, military, and responsible armed citizens. But one of the drawbacks is that stock trigger. Well, Jeff Wilson and the folks at Glock Triggers asked themselves, how do we make them better while maintaining reliability? Using stock parts as their foundation, they've refined the interaction of the metal parts to give you smoother take-up, a cleaner break, and reduced overtravel without sacrificing safety or reliability. Recommended and used by people like Bob Vogel, Travis Haley, and Ken Hackathorn, Glock Triggers custom trigger kits come with a lifetime warranty and a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. Visit them today at GlockTriggers.com and check out the Edge, the Vogel, the Skimmer, the Guardian, and the Hackathorn trigger systems. Use the promo code from this podcast, USC30, and save 20% off of your entire order. GlockTriggers.com, the highest quality drop-in trigger system for your Glock. Our special guest today is Kevin Farrar from Evansville, Indiana. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, tell us a little about yourself, where you're from there. What do you do in Evansville?
Well, Evansville's in southern Indiana, southwest corner, as far south as you can get. And I work at Toyota in the assembly production department. And my main focus is quality investigations, troubleshooting, and problem solving.
Very cool. And you are you the match director for the Holiday Havoc?
I am. We started 2 years ago.
Tell us how that got started, where you got the idea for the Holiday Havoc match and how it's grown and what goes into putting on that match every year.
Well, the club that I joined in 2016 had always wanted to do it. They had been an IDPA club for 6 or 7 years, but they didn't have the facility for it. And they managed to improve the facility greatly. They did a lot of berm work. They put in 12 new bays, which grew the facility to be able to support a major match. Mm-hmm. Well, with that in mind, after we were established for a year and let the dirt settle, if you will, we decided that we could probably try to pull it off. So we have a committee at the club. There's 5 or 6 of us that started the planning, and we kicked around a lot of different ideas and ended up sticking with the Holiday Havoc theme. That gives us some flexibility because we can use, if you've ever looked up odd holidays, there's plenty of ideas to go around. So I will never run out of stage ideas because all I got to do is Google weird holidays and it gives me plenty of ideas. So it's quite an undertaking though. It takes a full, I'm going to say 10 months because we usually won't start planning the next year until January. Mm-hmm. We usually, after the first one, we waited till January to really start planning the second one. And this year, we'll probably wait till January to start planning next year.
So tell us how the holiday theme figures into the match.
Well, so what we do is each stage, we pick a holiday. And then we design a stage based on a situation that you might be in on that holiday. For example, this year for Christmas, we chose Polar Express. So the stage scenario was you were on your annual Christmas trip on the Polar Express train when the train gets, bad guys attack. So we basically built 3 train cars out of the materials available, and you had to move down the train while you took care of the bad guys. Another one, for example, is the haunted house, which is my favorite. It's my baby. It's an all dark house. We build an entire house basically covered in black plastic, and you shoot no light in the daylight outside. So we're an outdoor range, but we build it in a complete bay full of dark room. This year the wind came and kind of gave us some fits, but it's really dark. You have to use a really good flashlight to be able to shoot the stage with any efficiency at all. And that's my baby. I'm the one who wanted it, and I'm the one who had to figure out a way to build a dark house in the middle of a bay. So
very cool. I've seen a stage like that at was it Nationals in 2016? They had a tunnel stage. So
yeah,
the only time I'd ever shot a stage like that. It was pretty cool.
So this year it was basically the whole front of the bay was walled off, and then we built a roof from berm to berm and covered it in plastic. So we had a full 18 rounds inside one room. And then inside that room, we made 4 other small sectioned off rooms to separate the targets. So it was like you were in a building with 4 rooms basically. And it was
dark.
In the dark, yeah, with a swinger. Everybody loved that. I had a swinger in there too. So you opened a window and a swinger started swinging. Yeah, that kind of had some people concerned, but it wasn't that bad. At least I don't think.
That is very cool. Let's talk about you for a minute. Where did your interest in guns come from? How did you're in rural or in southern Indiana? Did you grow up there? Did you grow up around guns as a kid, or was that something that you developed an interest in later?
Well, Evansville is a city, but it's 2 miles from my house when I growing up, quarter mile from my house for that matter. I could be in the river bottoms. So me and my dad's the one that had the interest, or had gotten me interested in guns at a very young age. He loves telling the story of when I was 4 years old, shot a 12 gauge shotgun by myself. It knocked me one way, the gun went the other. He just still to this day loves telling everybody that I was 4 years old and shot a 12 gauge shotgun. So I started shooting at a very young age, younger than I can even remember, because I can't remember that incident. But I started, squirrel hunting with shotguns when I was probably 7. The first time I remember going hunting by myself and killing a squirrel with a shotgun by myself. And that kind of is what I did all growing up, was, target shooting, 22s, squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting, stuff like that. As I got into my teenage years, I developed an interest in deer hunting, so I took that up. And I had shot pistol, 22, and my dad had a 44 that I'd shot, but I never shot a semi-auto, the more common 9s and 40s, 45s. I never shot any of those until I was, I'd say, probably 18. And I got a Glock 23 as soon as I was permitted to carry. And I carried that with me. That was my carry gun for forever until 2016 when I started shooting IDPA. I was still carrying that same gun. I still have it. I still my CCP gun, the same one. And I started shooting it in IDPA. Well, then I decided I wanted to change it a little bit, and I put a trigger in it and stuff. So I decided not to carry that one anymore, and it's just competition now. But I still have it. But I've always been interested in shooting, and I've always been fairly good at it, I guess you could say. It's like it comes natural to me.
Right.
I don't have to work super hard to shoot at an acceptable level. Now I have to work super hard to shoot at the level that I'm trying to get to.
Right.
It's a whole different level, but to shoot at an acceptable level for, common deer hunting and I really got into ducks and geese hunting. To do that kind of shooting, it came pretty natural. This pistol shooting's a whole different ball game.
Well, you were telling me a little about before we got started. How did you tell everybody about how you got introduced to IDPA? Where did your interest in competitive shooting come from?
Well, similar to another guest you had, it was on Shooting USA, I believe was the show. I was watching it on Outdoor Channel or one of ESPN Outdoors, and saw a show about IDPA, and they had a match where the people were in a grave, and they came up out of a grave, And I thought, well, that's cool. So I had to start checking into it, and that was my first exposure to IDPA, and that was in, I want to say it was 2015 was when I first found out about IDPA, found out it even existed.
And so you went looking for a place to compete. What did you find there in your area?
Well, with about a 10-second Google search, I found out there was two clubs within 15 minutes of my house that shot IDPA on a monthly basis. And like I said, I didn't even know it existed, let alone there was clubs within 15 or 20 minutes of my house doing it. One of them's actually 10 minutes from my house, and I didn't even know that they did it. So it was an eye opener. And so as soon as I found out that they did it, I got their schedule, and I was there the very next month, and was so disappointed because the very first match that I went to shoot got rained out, and I didn't know it because back then, I say back then, that was before practice score or before we were using it. There was no notification or registration. You just went the morning of and signed up. And if you weren't on their email list already, you didn't get any information. So I was going for my first match, and I was all ready to go. And I get there, and it's rained out, and there's not a soul on the range. And I'm thinking, well, what the hell? What? Why? Why today? So it took me another couple of months before I could get back due to my work schedule. But after that, I was hooked. I shot one match, classified the next month, and haven't looked back since.
What do you remember from that first local match?
Getting my shirt caught in my holster. Honestly, that's because it kept happening that day, and because it was the first time I had ever really done anything at speed with concealment, and I was wearing just a polo T-shirt. I wasn't wearing my vest and everything yet. I didn't have none of that. I just wore my T-shirt with an end of waistband holster, and I was carrying my shooting my carry gear. And the SO was so attentive to all the tiny details that he kept catching that I was catching my gun on my shirt when I was holstering, and he would stop me and make sure my gun was clear. And I remember it happened 3 or 4 times. And after that, I was like, okay, I got to change this because this isn't working. So that's where I started making sure everything was clear. No, my nerves were settling down a little bit, and I was paying more attention. But I still remember that getting my shirt hung on like a gun, like it seemed like every stage. The getting the gun out was coming out fine because I'd practiced that kind of stuff, But the reholstering isn't something that most people spend a lot of time mastering. It's just a task that we have to do after we shoot our gun a few times. But in IDPA, it's completely different. It's just as important as taking the gun out of the holster, in my opinion. I found out the hard way because I had a holster issue at Masters, and my gun hit the dirt, and I got to go home. And it was bad. It was a very eye-opening experience for me. It taught me a lesson I'll never forget, and that I've completely changed my reholstering mechanics and everything because of that episode where my holster slid back about 1.5 inches or 2 inches on my belt from a chair. Got hung on a chair when I stood up. So whenever I did my unload and show clear, I was looking downrange at my last target to analyze my hits. And I unloaded, showed clear, slide forward trigger, put it in the holster. The holster wasn't there. And I was so used to just dropping it in because all my dry fire and all my practice, I've just gotten used to muscle memory, putting it right where it goes and dropping it in. And I dropped it and it hit the dirt. And that was the end of my first experience at a Tier 4 match. 6 or 7 stages in, I got to go put my gun in the car. Luckily, and I'm very glad it was on the unload and show clear. My gun was empty, and I didn't actually jeopardize anyone's safety because had I done it with a loaded gun, I'd still be, I don't know if I would have picked the gun back up after that. If I dropped a loaded gun, it would have probably frazzled me even more than dropping an unloaded gun. But it opened my eyes, and it made a lot of changes in my technique and method of putting everything back where it's supposed to be.
Yep. What was your first, that wasn't your first sanctioned match, was it?
No. My first one was Illinois State in, I want to say 2016. And then I did okay in that. I didn't place or anything. I shot 3 or 4 sanctioned matches before I ever placed in to get an award. But my circuit there for the first 1.5 years was Illinois State, steam plant, backstoppers, and then those were the only 3 that I shot. Then I added Prairie Dale Shootout, and then I added Masters, and I went to Iowa, and I've been to Memphis now and down to Alabama to Talladega for the Nationals. And so I've really spread out now since that beginning when I was staying in Illinois and Missouri.
Yep.
And now we have one in Indiana. Or we have two now in Indiana. I should say that. We've had Indiana State for a long time, but I finally got in this year. When I took on the role as match director for Holiday Havoc, I literally had 3 match experiences for majors. So I had a very limited amount of experience to draw off of what works and what doesn't work and what I like and what I don't like. So I started hitting up a lot of them. That's why I went to Masters and I went to Iowa, and I was making some longer trips than some of the other guys that I shoot with want to make, because I needed to get some experience. So I hit up everything I could get that summer to get me as much exposure to the major matches as I could, so I could see what needed to be done. And that's the only way I could, I could read about it, but going to them was the best way for me to learn how they're supposed to work. Going to well-established ones like Iowa State and Masters, those are well-established matches that are ran well. So I wanted to get some experience with those guys.
Very cool.
It's very helpful when you go to the guys who's been doing it for a long time and you see they run like a well-oiled machine. and now I've got 2 under my belt and I'm still scratching my head. I told my wife, I was like, I don't know. I'm running around like crazy at level 10 stress throughout the day. And I'm like, do the other guys experience the same and I just don't see it? Or what are they doing different? I got to figure out what they do different to take some of this off of me, because I feel like it's just, I've got 150 people staring at me, looking at me going, what's going on? Why aren't we moving? Why are we backed up? Why is that target broke? And I don't know if the other match directors feel that way or not. I do, because I want everyone to have the absolute best experience they can have. And if that means me having to run for the whole entire week just to make it happen, that's what I've signed up for. So I try to delegate, and I'm not much of a micromanager. If I give somebody a task, I hope that they get it done. But then as a match director, I'm also ultimately responsible that it did get done. So I still have to go check it. So it's one of those things that I can have them do it, but I still have to go check it. And then if it's not, necessarily the way that I had envisioned, then I might have to tweak it a little bit. But typically it goes okay. Give the guys that are there that volunteer I got a great group of guys that want to help. I spent in 9 days, I was on the range for 120 hours, and I had guys with me pretty much the whole time that are, they're retired. They don't have a job, and they just come out there on the range with me just to help me build the match and build stages and build props. And they're just a great group of guys that a match director can't do it without not only the CSOs and the SOs and stuff you see on match day. The build crew is, they put in a lot of hard work and a lot of long hours. And a lot of times they don't even work as CSOs. You don't even know that they were ever there, because they go home after the match is built. Some of my guys, they don't even shoot it. They come and help me build it and then don't shoot. But so there's a lot to it that a lot of people don't see necessarily, because they see the CSOs and everything on the range, but they don't see the build crew that was there for 7 days or 5 or 6 days before trying to build it.
Now, do you design all your own stages, or is that done by committee? How do you do that?
Well, so the year before, the first year, it was a group effort. We all had a stage or 2 in the match, and we had one guy that had 5 or 6 because he was a very creative stage designer. And then this past year, he wasn't involved, so I took on a lot of the stages, but we still had creative input and technical input, I guess you could say, experience input into all the stage design. So we get all the stages and we sit at a table, me and my 5 guys on my committee, and we sit at a table and we look through all the stages and we say, well, this would be cool if we did this, or what if we did this, or we don't have the equipment to do that, but we can put this in there. So it is a group effort. Even though somebody's name may be on the design, there was 4 or 5 guys who sat around a table for hours and hours discussing stuff about potential, what we could do or what we can't do. So it's definitely a committee process, even though the stage idea may have came from one person.
So getting back to your shooting, do you, when you're not stressed out and trying to get a major match put together, what's your favorite division? What gun do you compete with most often?
So I have been focusing on SSP.
Mm-hmm.
This spring I focused on CCP with the goal of making master,
Mm-hmm.
and I made master and CCP in May. So I was already an SSP master, so I wanted another division. So I made master in May. So then after that, I switched back to SSP and focused on that, getting ready for nationals. And then I went down to Memphis and decided I'm going to shoot ESP, but I shot my SSP gun and made master there. So I ended up getting 2 master classifications this year, but my preferred division is SSP. That's the one that I shoot and the most, and that's the one I'm focusing on from now until the World Championship next year. I probably won't touch another gun between now and the World Championship next year. But it's a Glock 35 Gen
Mm-hmm.
4, and it's as if you don't, a 35 is a 40 cal. So people make fun of me for shooting a 40, but
So be it.
yeah, the way I look at it is I have a bigger hole with the
Right.
same power factor, and it cuts a lot of perfs that I wouldn't get
That's right.
otherwise.
No worries about
I had
breaking the perf.
a fellow competitor friend of mine that we shoot with. We compete against each other. We're in the same division all the time, and he had to point out to me at a recent match that I had gotten 5 points. I had gotten a 0 on 5 shots only because I was shooting a 40. Had it been a 9, I would have been down points. And I was like, "You're keeping track of that?" He goes, "It's been at least 5 already." Like, well, then I guess there is a benefit to having the bigger diameter bullet.
Now, you said that the shooting part of it came kind of naturally to you from an early age. What did it take in terms of practice to get to master class, and twice in, 3 times in 3 years, right?
Yeah. So my practice regimen is I do a lot of dry fire.
Mm-hmm.
I'll dry fire in the house at night when the kids go to bed. I've got 1/3 scale targets in all the rooms of my house. So I have different stages set up in the living room and different ones in this kitchen, and they're all over the place. So I do a lot of dry fire. I do a lot of trigger control drills just to make sure that when I pull my trigger, my front sight doesn't move, because that's ultimately the goal, is to pull the trigger without your sight moving, because
Mm-hmm.
up until that point, if it moves as you're pulling the trigger, it was all wasted. All your aiming was wasted. So
Yep.
that's mostly what I focus on, is grip, trigger control, and then I do target acquisition and transitions in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But I first admit it, my weakness is movement, and that's my goal this year. Is I'm focusing on movement, trying to get better at moving from position to cover, transitioning from a short target to a long target, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's harder to do in your house. So this year, and the guy that he's mentored me since I started taking it serious, Brad Edens.
Mm-hmm.
He's a phenomenal shooter, and he's very willing and capable to teach anyone if they're willing to put the time and effort in. So we usually shoot together twice a month, and then we also try to catch a practice session once a month. But that's my live fire practice is typically one weekend session that me and Brad and a couple other guys get together, and then two local matches, and then I might pull every once in a while, go and shoot 100, 150 rounds on a certain drill that I'm trying to improve or something like that. But I don't spend, I spend most of my time dry firing. I spend way more time dry firing than I do live firing, which I think most people do, but it's probably 4 to 1. I probably spend 4 times as much time dry firing as I do live firing.
Well, it sounds like it's working out.
It is. It's coming along. Still a work in progress. I just, and what surprises me still, I still haven't completely wrapped my head around it yet, was I actually won my first division championship at my own match. So I won SSP division champion at Havoc. It's my first division title, and it was at my own match after having spent 100 and some odd hours on the range, and just pure exhaustion, and mind was melted, and I still don't know how I did it. And it just shocks me that may be my answer, is don't go into them so over analyzing everything. Just go in and shoot. And I think I'm going to try to do that. I mean, I analyze my stages. Don't get me wrong. Brad is is big on stage planning, and he'll let you know if you don't do something right. So he is. A lot of my success has come from just learning how to do the proper stage planning, how to execute a stage plan. But I'm thinking maybe now that I can stage plan, maybe I need to start learning to not be so overly critical over every little detail, and just get my plan, know my plan, visualize it, and execute it without too much, fuss and constantly doubting yourself. Just get your plan and just go do it. And it worked this week, so maybe that's what I need to start working on, is just get my plan and go do it.
So as we wrap this up, what is it, the final question, what is it about IDPA that makes all of this effort and the hours on the range and all of the dry fire time worth it for you? What is it that is so much fun? What keeps you coming back? And what is it that you're passionate, or that makes you passionate about this sport?
A lot of things. It's the guys and the gals that I shoot with, the ones that they'll do anything for you or anything to help you. My hope is that the biggest gap we have right now is younger shooters. We don't have a lot of the younger shooters. So my goal is to make it fun and interesting and try to get more younger kids involved. But that's tough unless you get their parents involved. So I like to think that we can get some of our parents involved, that their kids will eventually get involved. My kids will be involved. My youngest already is ready to go, and he's only 4. My 8-year-old, he brings his airsoft out and shoots our stages after we set them up. He'll bring his airsoft out and shoot stages with it. So it's a family thing for me. My wife participates. She shoots in our monthly. She shoots Havoc. She works Havoc as the scoring. My kids help me set stages and build stages. So it's a family thing. It's a positive family thing, because everyone out of the house, gets us active. And we meet some really great people doing it. You won't find any better group of people than you will at a match. It's just everyone is so fun and get along, and we all have similar interests, so we have plenty to talk about. We can all give each other a good ribbon and not get offended and not get upset if we poke a little jab at somebody, and it's just fun. There's a lot of things you can do in group activities, but this is a few of the things that I found that is a pleasure for everyone involved.
That is for sure. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much to our special guest for coming on the show. If you know somebody in the IDPA community who deserves some recognition, I'd love to talk to them. Send me an email at Lloyd, LLOYD, at unloadpodcast.com. Check out the show notes for today's episode and listen to past episodes at unloadpodcast.com. And if you like what you hear on the show and you'd like to support us, help keep the lights on, pay the bills, we would love your support. Visit patreon.com/unload and make a small monthly contribution to help continue what we're doing here. Tune in again next week for another edition of Unload and Show Clear.